Hello, I'm going to talk about a few different kinds of phrases that you would have in a sentence. First, we're going to talk about infinitive phrases, then identify different kinds of verbal phrases, and then finally appositive phrases. Now, an infinitive to begin with. An infinitive is to plus a verb. This is how we would identify an infinitive in a sentence. If it is a phrase, it's going to have the to plus verb plus any modifier. So the infinitive plus modifiers. For example, the infinitive I can use in a sentence of to read. I like to read. Okay? Now, if I want to change it with an infinitive phrase, I'm going to say, I like to read stories to little kids. In this case, I have an entire phrase, to read stories to little kids. Again, the infinitive phrase is made by the infinitive plus any modifiers that infinitive has. With verbal phrases are identified in three different categories. First, verbal phrase can be identified if it contains a verb as a starting point. We've talked before about different kinds of phrases that include verbs, for example, participle phrases and gerund phrases. These are both examples of verbal phrases as well, because they start with a verb, even though the verb is being used in a different way. With a gerund, it's being used as a noun, and a participle is being used as an adjective. They are still verbs by themselves. The same is true with infinitives. So, along with the gerund and participle phrases, we would also include infinitive phrases, because the infinitive includes a verb form. Verbal phrases, again, they are starting with some kind of verb, but it's being used in a different way in the sentence. The use of the sentence is different. The individual word still is a verb. With appositives are nouns used to describe another noun. Now, usually they're used for clarification. And with appositives, they will be right next to the noun that they're describing. For example, I'm going to use a sentence with using the word or the name Samuel as an appositive. In my sentence, I want to identify my subject. I'll explain the positive and then the rest of the sentence. Okay? Here's my sentence. My brother Samuel works in the film industry. Now, in this sentence, who works in the film industry? My brother. Brother would be my subject. Samuel, although is right next to brother, is not my subject because it's describing my brother. I'm identifying that person. It's used for clarification. Now, there are two different kinds of appositives. Appositives can be either necessary, like in my sentence, or they can be unnecessary, or extra information. For example, if I switch it and I say instead, Samuel, my brother, works in the film industry, which is more important? Samuel's more important than my brother. However, if I had it the original way, Samuel was still more important. Therefore, I would have, they're slightly different in the way that they are identified. If your appositive is more important than your subject, in the case of the first sentence, my brother Samuel works in the film industry, then you would not put any punctuation marks between the subject and the appositive. However, if in the second sentence, Samuel, my brother, works in the film industry, if in this case my brother is not as important, so we would put commas around my brother to identify that it is less important than our subject. For an appositive phrase, it's going to be the appositive plus any modifiers that appositive would have. I'm going to again use the two words Samuel and my brother. My brother in this case will start my appositive phrase. So, Samuel, my brother, in the film industry, works with cameras and lighting. In this sentence, Samuel is my subject, and my verb is works. If I were to take out my appositive phrase, I would have Samuel works with cameras and lighting. But my appositive phrase is my brother in the film industry. In this case, the whole phrase between my brother and ending with the film industry, I would put in between commas because it's not as important as the first part of my sentence with Samuel. And it explains, again, it explains more information and identifies which brother I'm talking about or which Samuel I'm talking about in this case. This is the idea of an appositive. Appositive gives more clarification for the subject to make it so there's no confusion about which person or which thing I am talking about. These are some extra phrases that we have talked. Again, in the past, we saw participles and gerund phrases, as well as with prepositional phrases. Verbal phrases, and to remind everyone again, have to do with verbs that are used in other forms, but they're in an entire phrase. Gerunds, infinitives, and participles are all examples of gerund phrases. Gerunds, participles, and infinitives are all part of verbal phrases. Infinitives have to plus a verb. The phrases include any other modifiers, and appositives are nouns to rename something else, but they're always directly next to the word that they are modifying. Thank you, and I hope this has been helpful.